This is Ethics Bites with me, David Edmonds.
And me, Nigel Warburton.
Ethics Bites is a series of interviews on applied ethics produced in association with the Open University.
For more information about Ethics Bites and about the Open University, go to open2.net.
OK, bear with me. You're standing by a railway line. An out-of-control trolley is heading down the tracks towards you. Tragically, there are 5 people tied to the track ahead. It looks like they'll all be killed. Fortunately, you have a chance to save them. By turning a switch, you can send the trolley hurtling down a spur, a sidetrack, where, most unfortunately, one man is tied to the rails. But killing him would save the 5. There's another option. A second switch would operate a trapdoor on an overhead footbridge, dropping an unsuspecting overweight train spotter onto the track below, stopping the train, he's large enough to do this, but of course killing the train spotter. What should you do? A ludicrous scenario? Maybe, but these and other trolley problems have been used by philosophers such as Judith Jarvis Thompson and Philippa Foot to dissect and clarify our deepest intuitions about the morality of killing, about, for example, terrorism and euthanasia. Michael Otsuka is one of the leading experts on what's been called Trolleyology.
Michael Otsuka, welcome to Ethics Bites.
Nice to be here.
Now, the topic we're going to focus on today is known as the trolley problem, which is essentially a problem about killing one person to save many. I wonder if you could outline the kind of case that it's supposed to deal with.
Right, so let's begin with another problem, what one might call the tramp problem. We're to imagine that a homeless man walks into a hospital and the doctor who's treating him notices that he happens to be a perfect match for 5 different people who are dying of various organ failures. The question is, would it be permissible for the doctor to carve him up in order to transplant his heart into one of the patient's, lungs in another patient's, liver, and so forth? Now, most people have the immediate reaction that this would be a moral outrage for the doctor to do this. And the thought is that it's impermissible to kill one person, even to prevent 5 people from being killed.
And that contrasts with the trolley problem.
Right, so the trolley is an American word for a tram, and so we're to imagine the following case. A trolley is careening down a track out of control, and here you are, you see this horrible scene unfolding because you see that there are 5 people stuck at the end of this track. Now, if you do nothing, the trolley will run over the 5, but you notice that there's a lever alongside the track, and if you push the lever, that will turn the points of the track and send the trolley down a side spur. Therefore, you could save the 5. But unfortunately, there happens to be one person stuck on the side track. So if you turn the trolley onto the side track, you'd end up killing this one person. Now, interestingly, most people have the intuition that it's permissible to turn the trolley onto the side track. In fact, the BBC did an online poll, and 77% of 14,000 respondents agreed that you ought to turn the trolley on to the sidetrack. And another online survey, 90% of the people said you ought to do this.
So what it seems to me there is you've got this problem. In one case, it's permissible to kill an individual on a track. But in the tramp case, you couldn't possibly kill that tramp to get the organs to save the 5.
Right. How do we explain the difference? Well, here's one explanation. In the tramp case, we're to imagine that a doctor is doing the killing. And there might be special institutional reasons not to want doctors to engage in this sort of behavior. It's very important that people feel enough confidence to go to the hospital in order to be treated. If we started to fear that whenever we went to the hospital, if our organs happened to be a perfect match for people who are dying, the doctor would decide to carve us up rather than cure us, we'd be less likely to go to the hospital, and that would have bad effects overall.
So the really interesting thing is the contrast between these two cases, because our intuitions go in completely different directions. In the trolley case, it's okay to kill. In the tramp case, it really isn't. And one explanation is that in the tramp case, there are serious consequences beyond the death of the tramp. Our faith in doctors and what they're going to do to us when we go into hospital will actually break down. But actually, it's more complicated than that.
Right. We can just consider another trolley case. This case involves a footbridge that's over the main track. So once again, you have this trolley careening down a track out of control, and if you do nothing, the trolley will run over 5 people at the end of the track. Now, instead of sending the trolley off onto a side spur, this is how you stop the trolley from killing the 5. You use your bare hands to push someone off a footbridge over the track so that he tumbles onto the track. The trolley hits him, and his weight is sufficient to prevent the trolley from hitting the 5. And unfortunately, you end up killing that one person. Now, in this case, the vast majority of people who have been asked about this case have the intuition that it's impermissible to push the 1 from the footbridge onto the path of the trolley in order to prevent the trolley from killing the 5. Now, we can't offer the sort of explanation against killing the 1 that we offered in the medical case. There's no institutional reason that parallels the institutional reason we have to ensure that doctors behave in a way that will elicit the trust of patients. So we've got a new problem. Call this the footbridge versus the original trolley case problem. How do we explain why it is that it's permissible to kill the 1 in the act of saving 5 in the original trolley case, whereas it's impermissible to kill the 1 by pushing him off the footbridge in the second trolley case?
I think the temptation of some people would be to jump themselves rather than push somebody over.
If only you could sacrifice yourself by jumping off the footbridge yourself, you would do that. Unfortunately, you're just not large enough to prevent the trolley from running over the 5. There does happen to be a much larger person sitting next to you, so you decide with a heavy heart to push him off the footbridge instead of yourself.
And luckily you're strong enough to do that.
Right, yes. As Philippa Foot, who was actually the person who invented the trolley problem, would say at this point, philosophers have arranged that things are exactly as we've described them.
Okay, so my intuitions are very strongly that I shouldn't push this large person in front of the train.
In fact, you might be surprised to learn that psychologists have actually hooked individuals up to what are called functional magnetic resonance imaging machines. People are able to see what bits of the brain light up when people are confronted with these problems and decide what they should do. And as it happens, when people are presented with a footbridge case and the prospect of pushing someone off the footbridge, and when they recoil at that prospect, parts of the brain that are associated with emotional responses light up. Whereas when people contemplate turning the switch so that the trolley goes off onto the side spur and decide that they ought to do that, other bits of the brain light up, where these bits of the brain are associated with cognition and means and reasoning and the like.
So what do you think that shows?
Well, the philosopher Peter Singer says that it shows the following. Some cases have a certain evolutionary history. We once lived in small groups where it was possible actually to kill other individuals with your bare hands. And it's a good thing that people develop inhibitions against killing other people with their bare hands, because it's usually the case that when you go off and kill another non-threatening person, as this large person alongside you is, with your bare hands, that'll do much more harm than good. So we have this general inhibition or taboo that's been evolutionarily selected for against using your bare hands to kill non-threatening individuals. Now, in the case